Let's see, before we move on, I think I would like to ask the general manager if he could spend a few minutes on a topic that I think is probably at the top of most of our minds. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you. Obviously, as the mayor said, a very sad time to be able to reflect upon the horrendous accident that occurred on late Saturday, just before midnight, in downtown Portland. Our hearts go out, obviously, and prayers and feelings to the family and all others that were a part of engaged in the investigation, the elements of it. I do want to be able to stress, I've sent an email to the board, but I think I'd like to re-stress an element of it, and that is this is an investigation that is, the lead is the Portland Police Bureau, and our Transit Police Division is not involved in that, although Commander Vince Jarmer here might be able to give any insights if you are wanting in relationship to that process. But that is a police investigation. They have talked about it being very complex, apparently, to a large degree because of the number of witnesses and the interviews and the thoroughness. Our view is that we want that to be an absolute, thorough, independent review to determine as well as they can what happened, and to be able to answer the question that I think is on everybody's mind, certainly on ours and on the families, and that is why did this seemingly inexplicable tragedy occur? I have taken, and obviously when we receive that investigatory report, we will take whatever action is necessary if there are things. But I do want to let you know, and we'll pass out here, that I have taken 2 additional actions. One that started at 4 a.m. this morning, and that is to be able to have a personal contact by our supervisory staff, our trainers and others with every single operator to be able to share with them not only which they have obviously drummed into them in all regards, but that is that safety is the #1 priority. And attached to that was a training bulletin, and past that, it was available for the news media and others and anybody else who was interested. But it really does go through the elements of what we expect all of our operators to do at all times. We don't know what happened in this instance, and so it's not intended to be able to speak to anything specific other than what is our standard requirements. As sad as this tragedy is, it is an opportunity for us to be able to again re-emphasize, as we have repeatedly, the #1 priority being safety. I think as you will look through that training bulletin, you will find that it's something that I think we all would like, particularly given the reports this morning of that horrendous car accident with a young woman, expectant with child, to be able to have all drivers operate by these standards, because it's obviously more it applies in these situations. The first action, as I said, it began at 4 a.m. this morning. This is a payday in the bus operator world. Many people, instead of direct deposits, do take and pick up their actual checks. That's a chance for us to be able to interact with them, and that began. We will then, for anybody who is either not there or off on leave or other things, we will continue to be able to march through over the next number of days and weeks to be able to make sure we have contacted and personally emphasize how important all of these elements are in their everyday actions as operators. The second is that we have asked for a National Safety Council expert. I think the board knows that as we review any individual accident, we have involved an outside expert, in this case a National Safety Council expert. But I've asked that we also engage that National Safety Council expert, or a National Safety Council expert, to be able to evaluate all elements of our bus programs, all the way from training to our accident review and everything in between to determine, are there any additional things that other transit properties across the nation have as best practices that we might be able to learn from. I do believe that we have a very effective safety program, but I always want to be sure that we, if there are anything that we can learn, that we will learn those. Of course, we'll report to the board on what that review has been accomplished. Lastly, let me mention, because board member Lehrbach asked me in an email about whether or not we, on this review, if you recall our process, within hours after an accident such as this, we have what we refer to as a urgent safety review. It allows us to be able to go through and really determine what has actually happened. Because the police are still investigating and much of the information is still under their control, and we do not have it, that review was still took place on Monday. No real conclusions from it, but it will continue as soon as we have the information released from the police, so that we will be doing our own investigation as well. Although the comprehensive nature of that police investigation, I think, will be going a long ways to addressing the whys. At least I hope so. With that, be happy to be able to answer any questions, but obviously this is a very sad time.
Let me ask you, Commander, do you have anything you can or care to add to the General Manager's comments?
No, sir. The process is oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. The process is, for the most part, painstakingly slow, out of necessity. We don't want to miss anything. The first run at the police report has to be accurate and done correctly. So it involves pretty technical reconstruction of the crash scene, the compilation of the many witnesses in this particular incident, and the drawing of some conclusions, but we kind of try it. What we want to do is present the facts and let people make their own conclusions. The facts are what they are. We're not an interpreter of it, and other than the fact that we can explain some of the findings that we end up coming up with. But this one is a little bit more complex because of the number of victims and the number of witnesses. And so it'll take a little bit longer to compile all that. We have very highly trained, skilled members in our traffic division who have been doing this for years. In my previous life, before I came to the transportation division, I was the captain of the traffic division. And before that, I was assigned there on 2 different occasions as well. I have a real big familiarity with the people that work there, but also the process. Once we have that information, and in any case, in all cases of fatalities, there's review by the district attorney's office in the county that this would have occurred. And when that occurs, then the police report is made more public, I guess, in a way. But once the DA's office has a chance to look at the information and decide about any potential criminal issues, then we move on from there. Does that answer at least some of the process questions?
Do you have a sense of the timeline for completing the investigation and what your plan is?
My sense is probably, optimistically, late next week, when a police report will be done, and it'll probably be in that form before it's really released. But you know, as soon as I put a number on a timeline, it's wrong. So just take that with a grain of salt. Sometimes issues can come up, and forensic issues or whatever, that just delay things even longer. But the most optimistic of me would say late next week.
Commander, Vince, as TPD, Transit Police Division, not involved in that, that is a traffic division investigation solely. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct.
Chief, would you, reading in the paper that a 2-month wait time for the blood results, does that seem reasonable?
I don't know about reasonable, but it's entirely possible.
Yeah, it seemed, the crime lab itself, the state
Correct.
crime lab, that just seemed like an inordinate length of time to get the results back.
I believe that the crime lab is backed up quite a ways with requests for forensic evaluation of that kind of material. And so that 2 months seems long to me, but it doesn't surprise me.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr.